for somebody that has migraine brain, like we talked about this last time, that there is a certain percentage of people that are wired a little bit differently that do have this quote unquote migraine brain. Do they ever reach a state where they're always constantly having migraines? It sounds like it kind of comes and goes at pretty random intervals. Some people say like it's maybe once a quarter, but every, once a year, it's an entire month, like 5 times a week or something. It kind of come and go. Is that normal?
It's completely normal, and it actually can increase over the lifetime of the person. And it depends on the activity of the brain. And this is a touchy topic because many people are told, many women, about 12 to 15% of the population have migraines. And so when we're talking about people having migraines, 12 to 15% of the population, just in the United States alone, is like over 40 million people, right? If you're talking about 12 to 15%. And so that 12 to 15% is such a big number. And so first of all, you're wondering, what actually does this mean in terms of genetics? How come so many people have it? And if they have it, first of all, we know what happens. Well, why do they have it, and how come you don't have it? Because otherwise we are completely the same kind of people, right? So we all have the same everything. So we are genetically different, but then the question is why we are different. And so the biggest problem is that over the past 100 years or so, when migraine have become very, very common, it's always existed, but it became more common. Many doctors tell elderly females or females who are getting up to the premenopausal or menopausal stages, oh, it's going to disappear when you end up getting menopause. And that actually is bad. And so let me tell you how that works. As long as your migraines are increasing, that means that your brain is extremely active and you have all the connections and you have everything going and it's, significant. When migraine stops, that means something changed in your brain, something degenerated. And so in order to understand what that is, you have to understand that the migraine brain is different in that the sensory neurons associated with your eyes, ears, nose, the taste, touch, these are the ones that are enhanced. And I have an evolutionary explanation for this, which is that basically all humans were like this at the beginning. Because if you go to nature and you look at any wild animal, be it mammal or any other kind, they're always on alert. Every single animal has to be on alert, and they have to discover if there is a danger, an animal, a predator that's about to eat them. But it's better for them to discover it long before the predator comes. I mean, it's famous that there are animals that alert other animals, for example, because they see better, but this animal type is, for example, hearing better or whatever. They have very enhanced sensory organs. So humans too used to have such sensory organs because we used to live among these animals in the open, right, in the prairies. And then adaptation happened as humans moved into homes and moved out of areas where this danger appeared. But not everybody adapts at the same rate. And so I'm suspecting that there's a population of people who haven't adapted so well or at all to the modern lifestyle. And by this modern lifestyle, I include carbohydrates, carbs, light, anything that's artificial and anything that is basically protecting us from the need for this particular alertness. And so this alertness then has to express in a different way. And there's a chemical trick behind it all, because if you took all the migraineurs of the world and you put them on an uninhibited island and provided them exactly the same kind of food that they would have eaten, say 300,000 years ago, they would not have a single migraines. This is why the carnivore diet works amazingly. Of course, there are some modifications today because our life is different. We still have the light, we still have the cars, we still have the traffic and all the stimulation, which we shouldn't be having. And so it makes it very difficult, even with the carnivore diet, to control the migraine. But the reason is that we are living in an environment that is not natural to us, and we just simply haven't adapted the same way as other people have. And so when we're talking about migraine coming on sometimes just once a quarter, and then later maybe in your life once a day, and then later every day, yes, it's because you haven't changed your lifestyle. And so all the negative things that caused the migraine to the first place, the first time you got it, you still continue doing. And so it gets worse and worse and worse because your threshold after, it's just like a stress. A little bit of stress is good, right? A lot of stress is not good. And if that stress continues forever in your life, that is going to make it worse and worse and worse. And so then you're going to reach a point where your body says, that's it, I can't handle this anymore. And like, I'm unable to replenish the nutrients. I'm unable to do anything. I'm in big trouble. Start the emergency. And from now on, until it's fixed, I'm just going to hurt. That's just the way it is.
Wow, that is absolutely mind-blowing. And so if we could take a magic wand and erase all of the stuff that we have as part of our modern lifestyles, the food, the environments, the lights, all of that stuff, we might be and placed into a more natural environment that we would have evolved in. We might be sad for a week that we couldn't go on Instagram, but we would get over that very quickly, and people that have migraines would no longer experience symptoms.
Exactly. And this is what we actually see in the Facebook migraine group. When we change our environment, and we should talk about what that is, then the migraines pretty much disappear. I personally can still obviously get migraines. I get prodromes. So it's another thing we talked about, the pain is that isn't just a pain, and it isn't just a migraine. Migraine comes with prodromes. So you have visible signs, or at least signs that you can feel prior to a migraine. And you can act on them. So these prodromes will always be there, even on an uninhibited island, because the migraine brain is anatomically different from a brain of a person who doesn't have migraines. And that's because this adaptation isn't just like, okay, saying, okay, so from tomorrow, I'm going to be fine with noise and carbohydrates and light, but it is an actual physiological change in the brain, an anatomical change. So in a migraine brain, because we are more responsive to the environment and we are more on higher alert, our neurons associated with the sensory organs are different from yours or from somebody who doesn't have migraines, because the number of connections between these nerve cells that transmit messages is a lot more in the migraine brain than in any other brain. And there are a lot of papers on this. And so we have more connections. So for example, if a migraineur and a non-migraineur and a migraineur side by side are presented with the same exact stimulus, say light, same strength, the migraineur is going to think of it as a brighter light, just because there's going to be more neuronal communication and it's a more stimulation that is not inhibited, but it's just allowed to continue as a higher level of stimulus. So the migraine brain will assume it's a stronger light. So it isn't like, for example, migraineurs are sensitive to bright light. It's not bright light. It's just the same light as any other light, but they just comprehend it brighter. So the brain translates it as brighter because it is more enhanced. So the sounds too, migraineurs can hear sounds that are very, very faint, particular sounds that are outside of the norm. Like you always hear some white noise. And I'm not talking about noises like the lawnmower or some other kind of a strong noise. But for example, it may be a very noisy environment where I live. And out of the blue, the foghorn, which is 20 miles from me, will go off. You may not even know that there's a foghorn there, but I will hear it because it's different from the general usual white noise. And so the migraine vision, for example, I have really bad eyes, I'm wearing glasses, but you can't pass by me in my periphery without me noticing that something passed.
Wow.
And so we have different abilities as a result. And so our sensitivity is so strong that in the brain, in order to generate electricity, we have to use sodium. That's the function of the sodium in the brain. And so we need more. It's basically that simple, because a migraine brain just simply uses more. We have more neuronal connections. We have more stimulus coming in. We just simply have a different requirement for our food. Now, back in the ancient time, we didn't have all this stimulus. And so at that time, when we were more sensitive to or heard more, for example, that a lion is in the bush, more other people were like this as well. And so we didn't get a migraine at that time because also when we caught an animal, for example, we would eat the blood, and the blood is extremely salty. I just calculated the other day of how much sodium is in just 1 cup of blood. It's like 2,600 milligrams sodium. That's more than the daily allowance as per the FDA. And that's in 1 cup of blood, if they take 1 cup of blood from you. So our blood is extremely salty. And so if you kill an animal and you take its blood, it's fantastic. You just had your daily sodium right there.
Wow, that's crazy. And to contrast that with the amount of sugar we have in the blood, which is absolutely minuscule in comparison. So crazy to think about.
Right. It's minuscule, and also what sugar does, which is something that nearly nobody remembers of, yet it's in every textbook and it's every medical manual in the very front, is that when sugar can only, or glucose, I should say, can only enter into the cell by taking something out of the cell. I mean, a cell is not empty, it's full. So if you think about a glass of water completely full to the top, then you want to put in as much as a molecule of glucose, something has to come out, right? It sort of kind of sprays out. And so when glucose enters the cells, 2 things come out. One is water, and that's because a glucose molecule has 6 water molecules in it. So automatically a glucose molecule going in is going to displace 6 water molecules, because it's an exchange. It's just an equal exchange of the water molecules. And in addition to that, in order for the glucose to go into the cell, it uses the energy. It's not just a free diffusion kind of a transport rate, can go wherever it wants to. Glucose can't enter the cell without some sort of active transport. And so there are 2 kinds of transport, insulin or sodium. And 95% of the glucose in our body actually is active transport via sodium. And so when the way that works is that as sodium leaves the cell, it leaves through a voltage gated channel. It creates enough energy for the glucose to go in. It's sort of kind of an exchange. And of course, they use protein pores to come and go. But so every time you eat carbohydrates, when the glucose enters from the blood into a cell, it's going to take out both water and sodium. And so if you're a migraineur and if you eat carbohydrates and you're removing sodium and water, first of all, the water is going to go into edema, which is not within the cell and not outside of the cell. It's sort of kind of nowhere. And the sodium is going to be kicked out. So you're unable to generate electricity.